Welcome to AI and the Fine Print. I'm Lori McCreary, producer, co-founder of Revelations Entertainment with Morgan Freeman, and someone as a producer who's been kind of at the intersection of entertainment and technology for, I don't want to tell you how many years. Let's just say when Morgan and I first started Revelations on films, the biggest technology question would be, are we doing digital dailies or film dailies? And do you guys all remember DI? Are we going to do a DI? It's so expensive. I'm so glad I'm talking to an audience who understands these questions. Today, it's who owns your creative work? Who owns your voice? Who owns your image? Who owns your legacy? And when you work with Morgan, that's not just intellectual property or IP, it's really everything. And protecting that identity and the work that we all do, whether it's Morgan's or mine or yours, isn't optional anymore. It is the new front line of producing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. AI is transforming how we create, and it's also introducing legal, ethical, and financial risks that aren't always easy to navigate. This session, we're going to expose the landmines that are hiding out there before we sign those contracts, and dig into what's changed, how to protect your projects, and see where the gold mines are. And the opportunities if we're smart about it. So before we dive in, I want to level set everyone, talk a little bit about what's changed since last year.
So a lot of, I was here last year for our conversation, and when we were having this conversation last year, a lot of it was about, I'm really struggling with how to prompt models that are generative, that are going to be able to output content for me, and what do I really own at the end of the day when I'm interacting with these models that are out there. And there were really maybe 3 or 4 that I kept getting the same names over and over when I was talking with folks after our panel. What do you think about this model? What do you think about that model? The reality is right now, the amount of tools and products that are coming out every day that are enabling you all to either do just pre-production work that is using some kind of AI for concepts, or to do actual things that are going to be interacting, or that eyeballs of your audience are going to see directly when you're working with these AI tools. It is staggering. And I work with a lot of production companies. They literally have just 1 or 2 people whose job day in and day out is to keep up to date with these tools and to be kind of the tool whisperer. It's an interesting role that some of these companies have. And some of those folks are becoming the most important kind of on the ground people that are out there within the production process about how to integrate and utilize the various tools.
And Ghaith, we're seeing in California some legislation that's come through. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think there's been some really forward-thinking legislation. There's 2 bills that now require written consent for anyone to create digital replicas, whether it's your voice, the likeness, or a synthetic double, whether they're living or deceased. And I think we all remember during the 2023 SAG after strike, we remember that, right? When background actors were raising their hand and saying, wait a minute, somebody scanned my face and now it's being used all over the place. So there's now new legislation where producers have to time-bound any kind of digital replica, and people have to get paid fairly for its use. But that's in right, that's a good thing to clap for. But that's in California, right? So Ghaith, can you explain, does that extend to the rest of the planet? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, any entity that is producing, developing, or most importantly, distributing content within California can come within purview of these state laws. And it's just California. One interesting thing from California, when AB 2602, which talks about your ability to make digital replicas of live performers in 1836 came out, which says, how can I use the name, image, and likeness of deceased individuals within these models came out. Those were just 2 of 17 different state bills that came out in California alone on AI and the various aspects of AI. Within that set, there were even additional laws that say, if you are providing a service that is being used by some number, it depends on the law, whether it's 1 million or in some cases more of users per month, you've got to now have disclaimers that say this is AI generated content. And what does that mean these days when AI is going to be so endemic in a lot of the processes that we're doing? And then there was even a sweeping AI law that was going to govern the models that are being developed, how they are developed, but that one got vetoed by Governor Newsom. And that's just California. We've seen Colorado come out with the Colorado AI Act that governs things like high risk that hopefully are not going to be as relevant for you all, but time will tell how high risk is really determined within these state laws. And we saw whiplash in the federal government. We saw President Biden's administration release a very sweeping executive order on AI. But what I like to explain to folks right now is the change that's happening is extremely fast, but at the same time, it's extremely brittle. And what do I mean by that? These changes can come in really quickly, but they're not solidified. The Biden order on AI was just an executive order, and we saw what happened when the new administration came in. When the Trump administration came in, one of its day one orders was to repeal that entire AI order by the Biden administration. So we saw the whiplash that was happening, and now we're even seeing chatter about within the federal government, let's put a moratorium on any AI regulation, any AI statutes at the federal level for the next X amount of years, and wanting to put that in the new legislative bill that's coming. So there's a lot of changes, but the thing to caution you all is even when you do see these changes, as quickly as they come, they can easily go away really quickly. And I know that's really challenging and shifting sands to build on, but it's something to keep in mind when you see things that are rapidly evolving at the legislative level.
Yeah, and a couple other things that have happened legislatively. Don't know how to say that. The U.S. Copyright Office clarified that copyright protection only applies when there are works with sufficient human creative input. And Ghaith is going to get into that a little bit more specifically because that's really important for us as producers. And then there's other things like the increased focus on union protections. For example, actors, you cannot digitally clone an actor without their approval and also without paying them. And that there's now precedence for metadata auditability, which is when Kathleen speaks in a minute, where the gold mines come in, where we might be able to figure out how to make some money on this. And there's international IP conflicts, like Ghaith said. What is here does not necessarily travel overseas, and it doesn't apply everywhere. And there's a growing trend of shifting terminologies, which is forcing new definitions. So even in our contracts, I have to learn new definitions. It used to be called AI tools. Now the AI tools are called AI collaborators. They used to be called digital extras, right? Digital extras, you saw them in the credits. Now they are synthetic performers. And when I think about this, I'm thinking, did AI suggest those terms? Because they seem a little human-like to me. So with the changes happening every month, Ghaith, like you're talking about, and you are at the highest level of these conversations on the legal side of things, I'd like you to unpack how this is going to work for us and what happens in the vendor contracts for us, and most importantly, who owns what and can I copyright it?
So a lot of what I do, I've been fortunate to be on both sides of the ecosystem or on multiple sides of the ecosystem. One being advising the Metas, the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, the Black Forests who develop Flux, advising them directly on how they can draft their terms when others are interacting with them. And the first question they always tell me is, all my users, they want to know what can they do with the output of these models. And it can be really confusing because in some cases you see some models that are just made freely available. Go take it. It's an open source model. You can do what you want with it. But if you want to own or commercialize the content, that's where you have to then subscribe to a higher tier of model. And a lot of folks don't understand. It's literally the exact same model. It's not like it has different functionality. It's just that the legal terms that are attached to the use can differ based on which version you might be using.
Ghaith, can I ask a question? Because this is really important for producers. So if you're using the free version of whatever your AI platform is, and I realize, oh, someone's buying it now, and I've just generated all of this great content, now I pay for it. Do I have to recreate it in the paid version, or can I use the version that was in the non-paid version? Like, this is confusing.
Yeah.
No, you have to You got to recreate
You got to recreate it. Okay, so this is really important for us, right?
Sorry,
You
guys.
can't just take it and use that and then say, now I'm paying for it. So what that means is, think about it. Document all your prompts. Document everything that you put into, if you're ever using a free version. Document it, right?
Yeah.
So that you can try to recreate it. It's not going to be perfect.
Definitely recreate the
It won't
same
be
thing.
perfect.
That's not how generative AI works.
Yeah.
And look, sometimes you might be thoughtful and say, I just want to experiment with this. This is to help me just come up with concepts or ideas, or I want to show a casting director something, or I want to be able to work with costume and help them understand what I'm going for. And in those cases, I will just tell you what I'm seeing in the market is that people are engaging with the open source models. In those cases, it's not directly interacting with eyeballs. Is that permitted? That's a conversation that we can have. But let's just talk about kind of the trends. Right now, just in the conversations that I have with model developers, they don't want to own the output that comes out from these models. They don't want that noise. They don't want to be able to have ownership, or to have you all come and say, why did you try to own this output that came out? That's not what they're looking for. And a lot of them will just disclaim ownership rights, but they'll be really careful to tell you, I'm not guaranteeing you own this, because there's a whole set of additional law outside of the contract that we'll get into. But as I said, look for those restrictions. What restrictions do they have on how you can use them? Can you use them in production-ready content? Can you use them and distribute them to your providers? We'll get into some of the restrictions. And then the last piece that I will say on these, and this might be the most relevant when you are using content or rights that have been licensed into you, and this is where providers really, really do care about. How can the tool providers themselves reuse either the content that you've put in or the output that has come out? That's where the rubber hits the road, because the reality right now is there's just not enough content out there for these model developers to keep training and improving their models. And a shortcut, for better or for worse, and we talk about what that's doing to our world, but the shortcut is they're using the output of these models to then further train and improve their models. And so all that good, important, creative stuff that are being generated by those models, that is a gold mine for the providers of those, the trainers, and they want to be able to reuse those. And what does that mean when you've got licensed content that's been brought into you that says you can't share this with anybody else, you can't allow anybody else to reuse or reproduce that? That's where we have to be really thoughtful about what can the providers do.
Yeah, and how do you advise producers to think about when they're fine-tuning models with their own content? Or if they're a writer and they've written a Bible and now they want to take that Bible and use Claude to flesh it out.
Yep.
Claude can then use their words to further train Claude, correct?
Right. Yeah. So fine tuning is this concept for folks who, I'm sure some folks have been in the trenches on this, and some are like, oh, I know that word, I guess. But when we're talking about fine tuning, we're talking about taking a vanilla model, whether it's VO3 or Claude or Black Forest Flux or Ideogram, what have you, and saying, I'm going to train it just like I would train a staff member of mine or somebody on my team on a ton of my own content, so that when I'm using it, whether I'm doing that through a formal training layer, and those interfaces exist. You can log on right now to, for example, llama.api.com, and you're directly uploading your content, and you're getting a version of a model that is custom for you, that knows what you want, knows the look and feel that you want. A lot of those terms are going to say things, because I've written some of them, and please don't attack me afterwards if you're not happy with it. But a lot of those terms do say things like, we can reuse that content, and you got to be careful. But on the other hand, we are advising, and I am telling model developers, why do you want that? Do you honestly really want that? Or are you just being grabby? What do you really need to do? And so there is a trend for model developers to say, I'm going to let them fine tune, and I'm going to put that in a dedicated, segregated environment that nobody else will have access to.
So Ghaith, if because I know in some of these platforms I can turn off, use my data to train the rest of your model. I can turn that off, but it sounds like there might be also something else contractually that I need to do if I'm working on a commercial venture with these platforms.
Yeah, and you should look at what the tiers of use are. many of them, the tiers of use, because the reality, like I said, is the models are not that different. The ways people are distinguishing tiers of use or what the gold gives you versus the silver or the bronze package are additional rights and less uses by the model developer.
So we have to read all that fine print. That we just say, I agree, I agree.
When you're thinking about this, how do you think about if they're using a foundation model and there's existing IP in it, like that's been scraped from the internet?
Yeah.
The intermingling of IP when they're commercially using and
Those are all great. How about
diving into the gnarly shit?
We have a section later where we'll talk about, do model developers, do they have your back when, if hopefully you never do, but if you do get sued for use of the models or use of the output of the models, what do the model developers, what are their obligations to you? That's actually been changing a lot. That is a very big change from last year. And there are levels of indemnity that are being provided, i.e., I will make you whole if you get sued from use of the models, but they have a lot of exceptions. We'll get into that later, yeah. The other big thing that I want to talk about, so I previewed last year that the U.S. Copyright Office was looking at this subject because they were getting flooded with applications of people saying, look at my generated output, I want to register a copyright on, I want to get a registered copyright on it. Can I? And they were rejecting, and folks from last year might remember we talked about Zarya of the Dawn, which was an example of a comic book in which the pictures of that comic book were generated using Midjourney, which was still a really widely used tool. And the Copyright Office said, no, those pictures are not copyrightable. You can register, and this is really important for you all where they've clarified, you can register the comic book as a whole. And what that means is you get to own the collection, the unique way in which that's been collected, but the individual assets within that book, I'm not going to let you register. So what does that mean for you? It might mean I'm going to make a clip and I'm going to use a tree or a car or some model in there that's been generated by AI, but I don't really care if somebody reuses that tree or that car. That's not what I'm worried about. I don't want somebody to use the entire clip. That's what I care about. And the Copyright Office has tried to thread that and say, when you as a human are selecting what goes where, you're saying, I want that tree there, I want that person to be over here, I want them to say this, that human selection can make the entire collection as a whole, the piece that eyeballs actually see, that copyrightable, even if the individual assets within them are not. That's a really important distinction. If you go back one slide, actually, I just want to talk about one thing from there. So here's what they did. They did a report. It came out January 2025, and it was trying to answer the question about what do you own when you are using these tools. And here's what they said. They said a few things, but just look at the one in red. I put the others here in case anybody, I already see some folks taking pictures of it and you want to just read it on your own. But the part in red is the most important. And that they said, copyright does not extend to purely AI-generated material or where there is insufficient human control over the expressive elements. What does that mean? That means you can have the most incredible prompt. I came up with a 5,000-word prompt. It's really creative. Nobody could figure out how I prompted this tool. That doesn't matter, because that's not the expressive element. The expressive element is what comes out on the other side, the output. And the Copyright Office sees it like you gave an independent contractor out there a 5,000 text story Bible and you said, make something out of this. That doesn't mean you own what they made unless you have a contractual written agreement for them to assign those rights to you. And the same principle is what the Copyright Office is using now when you're engaging with these AI tools.
And so the AI, the product from the AI is, I cannot copyright that. I have to do something called sufficient human control over it, and then I can copyright it. So let me ask you this, because before someone gave me a script, I didn't care if they did it on a PC or a Mac or a typewriter, as long as I got a file, right? I didn't think about how they actually created it, or someone gave me, hey, here's a great character I came up with. I don't care whether they did it in paint, or, look, I'm talking the olden days, right? Paint or acrylic, or they even did it on their computer. But now how do I how do I assess, or how do I find out, or how do I get them to tell me where they used AI and where their human control
Exactly.
was, and how do I document that so
That's-
that I can copyright it?
That's why it's critical when you are engaging with outside providers, anybody who's not within your organization. We'll talk about folks within your organization. When you're engaging, have them contractually be required to disclose to you when they've used AI in what they've provided to you.
Because everyone is not, well, part of our organization, right? Many of us are we contract people to write and to do our graphic design and all of that. So it's almost all of our products, right? We have a lot of products we're going to be having to look at.
And look, let's say, and I literally had a conversation with a production company last week on this. They prompted a tool over weeks and finally got it to a place where it made this animated character that was exactly what they wanted. It was like right on point. And they said, great, we want to use it. And I came in and I was like, I have the really awkward position right now as a lawyer who knows nothing about creativity to tell you this needs more. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, this needs more if you want to own this character. And you're going to have to change some of the eyeball features or change some of the skin features or just do something creative on top of that during this time. Now, look, maybe the law will change. The reality is, after the Copyright Office released this report, they released a second report on can you get sued for developing models using copyrighted content. And shortly after that report was sued, the head of the Copyright Office was fired by the Trump administration.
Ghaith, do we need to have you at our company, or how are we going to, how am I going to know, no, you need to change the eyeballs?
I don't think you need to consult with a lawyer at every single step. The principle that you need is that if there is something that you want to prevent others from reusing, redistributing, recreating, an important element of its creativity has to be done by a human. What does that mean now? That is something that's going to be decided. And if you are really risk averse because this is the core element of what you're doing, then make sure that a lot of it is made by a human and it's inspired by pre-concept generations by AI. If it's something in the background, like an extra or an asset that you don't really care about, then you may say, I don't need to spend all that time and energy by a human to do that. I'm okay with just having technology fill in the blanks for the rest of my canvas.
By the way, I just heard someone here, their inside voice came outside and they said, just write the script or draw the character.
Yes.
Crazy. You spent weeks prompting. Like, you could just have spent weeks drawing.
So I have tons of B-roll footage from movies I've done. I have tons of shots we didn't use. How do I figure out, with Ghaith probably, if I actually can license for the training license or the NIL? I think I kind of get that I can't, but how do I know if I can use it for training?
So it's tricky because your contracts with the people who performed in that footage or your location agreements, all of that does not
AI
contemplate
wasn't
it.
around.
AI wasn't around. So it really depends on your kind of risk level. For large-scale training volume license, the risk is low that it's going to explicitly output someone's face. But what I have recommended to people we work with is just go get the actors agreement and let them participate in your upside. You're going to cover yourself. It's going to make everyone happy and move on, especially if they're union. I just be mindful of your collaborators and bring them into the deal somehow. Do a simple agreement where you say, if I make money off of training license, this is what percentage you'll get. It's a gray area.
Yeah, I wonder if SAG would work with us.
It's tricky because SAG is, it's a labor union. They can only really get pension and health off of if someone works. As opposed to they can't take participation in licensing. So for example, in a merchandise license deal, they don't participate. If you're a well-known person who's in Marvel and your face is part of a Marvel toy, they don't participate in that.
So I was just thinking where we can get those kind of standard contracts, because
I don't think they're standard yet.
they're not standard.
That's the thing.
Can you make some standard
They are
contracts?
all over the place.
There's no standard.
As an example of why this can sometimes be extremely backwards and just weird, we were doing a deal with a very large studio who prides itself on having A+ content. And in their deals where they distribute or make their content available, they're used to having most favored nations clauses. So that means the pricing I get will be no worse than the pricing anybody else gets for my content. talking with the developer, they said, I actually don't really find this content valuable. And as a matter of fact, I paid more for this really obscure set of content that came out of Boston from a radio station because it's really hard to replicate a Boston accent, and I can't find it anywhere else. But these folks had a trove of it. That's what I wanted. I actually didn't care that this content won
Had
an
Matt Damon in
award.
it.
Yes.
His Boston accent is not that great. They aren't looking for the people who are driving the decisions around the training licenses are AI researchers.
So they want
they're
unique
PhDs.
data, right?
They want unique data. They want large volumes of it. They don't care that it's a famous person yet. They will in a display license place. They just need large volumes of stuff, and it's very specific stuff. So like, even if you're Disney, they're like, nah, I can go get cheaper data over here because all I need is conversational data. Like, I don't need to pay you that much. And so it's a weird dynamic, but the good news is most of these deals are non-exclusive. So you can license, in a training environment, you can license your data over and over again.
Oh. So if God shined upon me and I was able to go get my, 120 hours of the Madam Secretary show and I got the AI rights, let's pretend, and I go to you or one of your competitors and I say, I want to license the training data and the NIL data, how do I know?
You have the NIL rights too? That would be
this
impressive.
This is God is like shining on me and I get it. But I just want to kind of ask the question. So I have these rights. How do I know when my data has been used? There's trillions of pieces of data that are in there. How do I know when my
So our
120 hours
system,
has
that's
been
why
hit?
we exist. So our technology will we take your data through a process that we call atomization that breaks your footage, 120 hours of it, into its elemental parts. So it goes through a entire pipelining process. This is very nerdy, breaks it down into all its little bits. So like separates the sound from the video, separates all the voices, diarizes all the script. This is just from your video. You don't have to send us anything but your video. We then break it up into smaller parts. Then we take it through a process called vectorization.
Yeah.
That vectorization allows the AI model to more easily train on your data.
So
and
wait,
then while we do that,
Okay.
we fingerprint it.
Okay.
We give it each single element and each atom of those elements
A unique ID.
a unique 16-digit hexadecimal code.
Okay.
And those combinations of those hexadecimal codes create a fingerprint
Right. So
that allows us to match
So
your
then
data
you take-
proportionally within
You take that
outputs.
data and then it gets sucked into one of these AI
Sure, you have a
platforms.
partner, let's say it's 11 Labs.
Do they have to look at the data then and report to you based on?
So
the
when
fingerprint?
every
You
time
guys
they
have
create an
already done
output that uses your data,
Yeah.
they send that back to us. We fingerprint it.
This is
And-
already in place.
Yes. We fingerprint it. We track it. We pay you for how much it's being used.
Okay, and is every AI platform doing it that way? Are they?
We're in the early part of the market.
What
where
about?
we're starting
sorry,
to do work.
ask
do
about your
deals.
competitors, but who are the other companies doing
So
this?
it depends on what modality you're focused on. There's a company called ProRata that's really focused on text. That's
Okay.
probably the best known version of what we do. And then there are emerging companies focusing on music. We also happen to do music. Our modalities are image, music, video, and then text is on the roadmap for 2026.
Okay.
So we're building out a multimodality system.
So we're right in the process of being able to.
Correct.
Okay.
And so to me, the thing is this is where IP holders and technology companies like ours need to partner because major foundation models are going to develop their own systems like this. It's going to be just like Content ID at YouTube.
Yeah.
I worked at YouTube prior to almost 10 years ago now when they developed Content ID. And it's going to be the way they grade their homework. And like what I keep saying to people is do not let them grade their own homework. It is a bad move.
Yeah.
It's what we did with YouTube.
Yeah.
I was at YouTube when we did this. We then renegotiated all the deals. And not because we're the bad people, because we're a tech company. We wanted to make more money and we wanted to make all of our deals the same after we integrated Content ID.
Got it.
And then what followed is Facebook attempted to develop a system similar to Content ID and then basically stopped. And TikTok has one and it doesn't work so great. So like when you you grade their own homework, they're not incentivized because they don't make money off of matching your content. They're not incentivized to put the engineering resources behind it to support protecting it.
Yeah.
That's why you need a third-party partner like ourselves or others.
No, I think, and it's so great because, we've been talking about this for a while, the companies out there that scrape the internet and have a lot of copywritten materials. I don't know how we undo that, but the new companies that are coming out that are only using licensed materials.
Yeah, like great
think those are
engines
people.
and models.
Yeah.
Moon Valley is developing one. There's
Yeah.
some really great people out there trying to build ethically trained models, and they're partnering with people like us to track and audit any licensing deals. And this is, just touch base on this line. We expect there to be about $10 billion worth of deals done this year.
Billion?
Billion.
Okay. How many want to be involved in that? I do.
It's going to be a massive opportunity.
That's great. That's fantastic. And these opportunities are real and growing, but the rules are still being written. So let's all be really careful about what we're giving away or what we're even.
And that's why, to me, it's like with a partner like us,
Yep.
you can track and audit that. You can say, you can only use my data in this version of the model. If you do a new version of the model, you need to do this. Or you can only use my data for a year and you need to purge it, and this system needs to be able to audit and make sure I can purge it.
Okay, so in the very least, shorter-term contracts that
Shorter-term
they have
contracts.
to renew at your discretion, I think would be a good thing to write down for today. I'm going to write it down.
And the other
Yeah.
thing that we had a producer that was maniacal about documenting all the details about where something was shot. It was shot during a cloudy day with the producers at 9 a.m. in the morning, or the actors, excuse me, at 9 a.m. in the morning. That some of them they ate. This was literally their diet that they had before they filmed.
I love this producer.
This is the metadata, right?
All
In the
that
metadata.
little enriched little detail, that is gold for these model developers.
Absolutely.
So the more that you are able to provide information about the content, where was it done, on what day, who are the actors,
What lens was used?
What
Yes.
language?
What kind of color correction was applied? All of that is stuff they cannot get from you if they scrape it from YouTube.
Yeah,
That's
and
what you have to
everything
remember.
that's in there now doesn't have that
Doesn't-
metadata.
What they did is they paid people in the Philippines $1 a tag to tag it all and watch it when they scraped it. So now they would like to not pay people $1 a tag to tag it, and they would like better
Us
tagging.
$1 a tag.
They would like better tagging. So they will take your call sheets.
Yeah.
They will take all of your information that you have in your files because you're very organized, amazing producers. And they will include that in the training so that the machine understands it was a cloudy day in Cleveland at 9 a.m. on this day in this year. Because that's all stuff that helps the model understand what it's looking at. And it's very valuable.
Okay, I'm going to move to a new landmine. How about that?
We're out of the fun part.
Yeah, some people call it the producer's paradox. We're being told, I don't know about you, I'm being told, hey, use AI to make this project less expensive. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to use AI. But what if something goes wrong? If the voice sounds like somebody who I didn't license, or if AI borrowed from copywritten material? Right now, the distributors are saying that I have to take the responsibility for that. Like, we're the ones on the hook. So use AI to save money, but it's on you. Ghaith, help us.
So a lot of the model developers right now, they just want you to be using their models. That's their number one focus. Some of them are not focused on making money off those models yet. They're not focused on trying to find out information about how those models are used. They want to get there. They just want them to be used. And they're being told by users of their models that I am nervous about touching your model because I don't know where the thing came from that came out of it. Can you give me some kind of protection? And as a response to that, this is a new update from last year, I would say, in how prevalent these are, is that in the LLM sector, large language model, text-to-text sector, there is overwhelmingly now a trend towards model developers are saying, I will agree if you are sued by a third party for your use of the output that came from my model, that I will indemnify you. I will step into court and I will take on that litigation.
This is for writing text?
For writing.
Okay.
There is some that is happening on the image side, on the video side. I would say it's not as prevalent. And I think, frankly, a lot of that is because the image and video side is not as mature yet. They're newer models, they're newer technologies, and they're newer companies that aren't there yet. I have every reason to think it'll eventually move towards the same place. However, you have to be worried about a few things. Remember how I talked about at the beginning? A lot of the models kind of are the same, and people are trying to think about how to make theirs better, or why you should buy the paid version versus the free version. In a lot of cases, only using the paid version gives you this indemnification. That's number one. And then number two, the scope of the indemnification is still quite narrow in many instances. So it's only an indemnification for copyright infringement. What does that mean? That means a third party is suing as saying this output that is substantially similar to my own original content. It outputted something that looks substantially similar, because that is the test for copyright infringement. Not that it was trained on. That's going to be really difficult to prove until we get to the technologies that makes it traceable. And even then, the legal standard is a whole rabbit hole that we could talk about afterwards, about why it's going to be hard to prove copyright infringement merely because somebody, just like a human, may have just been inspired by some content. Does that mean that the training information that it got resulted in the output being completely original but still being deemed to be infringing? That's a separate question. And that's not what the indemnity is covering for in a lot of cases. It is merely, does the output substantially resemble, is it substantially similar to other content? So that's number one. The number two, let's talk about number one on this one. They don't indemnify for changes to the output. And I fully acknowledge that creates a catch-22 for producers. Why? So what they will say is, hey, if you tweak this output, remember how I talked about before the animated character, and we said, you got to change the eyes, or you got to change the skin, or you got to change something if you want to own the copyright in it? Great. That might help you assert ownership of the copyright, but it then is going to impact you on being able to take advantage of indemnification from the model developers. So that's the first, changes to the output. It's not going to cover you for publicity claims or NIL claims, as we talked about, from the actor. It's not going to cover you if SAG comes and says, you developed this, even if you had all the rights, but you didn't do it through a collective bargaining process, and I'm muddying your ability to do this. That's not what it's protecting you. It's not protecting you from any prompts you put in. So importantly, what I'm seeing a lot of folks are doing is they are bringing in, they want to use a model. They say, I want you to make this really similar to this 1,000 hours of content that I'm bringing in, or make it really similar to the look and feel of this studio. And they're prompting it, or say, literally spit out XYZ famous character and make that. If you prompt it in a way that is designed or that would reasonably be thoughtful as thought to be developing something that's infringing, that's not going to cover you. And again, all of these are easy for me to say. They haven't been tested in court, and they're just words on paper that have not been tested, because I haven't seen a lot of the indemnity claims actually be tendered yet. It's just words on paper. You're not seeing these get tested. Other things are failures to comply with acceptable use policies. You should read them. A lot of these model developers, in the terms, they'll say, in addition, we have ethical use policies or acceptable use policies. And those matter because any violation of those won't be grounds then for getting indemnification. And obviously, at the end of the day, if it's content you should know is infringing, something that obviously resembles something that looks like a famous character, the indemnity also won't cover that as well. So sure, it's there. It's a nice little box that I guess you could say I got it. But if you really dig into the details right now, it's a very leaky box, and you have to be careful about plugging those holes in a way that actually makes sense for you.
That's the very thing that has been like blowing my mind. My head is spinning because, okay, they'll indemnify me if it comes straight out of their AI program, but I have to change it so I can own it, so I can put it in my project, so I'm not indemnified. That's tricky for me. So if your guys' heads are spinning too, you're not alone. We have a couple slides to go through, the last two. One is, what are our mitigation strategies? How do we mitigate our risk? And these are the things we can do. You know, ask questions. Use AI models that are trained on licensed materials. Then you don't have to worry about it being something else. Check your AI language in the fine print. That's really key. Partner with unions. We're all adapting. They're adapting. I think that's a great thing to do. And I think the next thing is, what can we actually do today? This is your first line of defense, the next slide. Whether you're generating a pitch deck, looking at a new post project, looking at a project, looking at a software project that, that your studio wants you to look at, you have to answer these questions. The first questions are what you ask the AI platform. Who owns this content? Are you going to use my content and train something else? Are they going to reuse our content in any way? Where is your data stored and governed? Because if it's not here in the US, there might be a problem. And then for yourself, you have to ask yourself, can I copyright this material? Am I doing something that's outside the bounds of that where I'm going to be indemnified? Can we track and audit things? Like, I want to know if there's some kind of a program that helps me track and audit my scripts, my graphic materials, and are we replacing any guild labor? That's a really big one for producers to look at. So I would take a picture of this if you would. It's really important for us to answer all these questions, not only from the vendor side, but from your own team side in terms of producers. And I'm talking fast because we have like a countdown clock. So Ghaith, Ghaith or Kathleen, if you want to start. Just any last thoughts for everyone, and then we'll wrap it up.
So I know today's session was very technology focused, and that's just the reality of where things are going, right? If technology and content continue to converge. One nugget that I just want to drop, and if this is a tangent for you and you're like, I'm really heads down and trying to make my thing, fine. That's a wonderful endeavor. More and more, I am talking with production companies that are saying, I'm actually two companies now. I'm a technology firm that is developing or using my own technology in new and novel ways, and I'm a content firm that actually makes beautiful, engaging, enriching, important content for the world to consume. And importantly, I have investors that are really interested in investing in the technology side, but are really worried about what the market's going to look like on the content side. And more production companies are thinking about, do I form actually two units, where I have a technology wing and I have a content wing and I have arrangements in between, and maybe even investors on both sides. Those are becoming more and more prevalent, even at the indie producers level, where you're just a few folks that are trying to work things. You could still think about, what technology am I making that I want to make my own and let people participate in?
To build on that, I would say, as you guys are working with models and working with things that are hopefully ethically trained, because that will ultimately serve you in the end, and you're fine-tuning stuff, you should have an audit and tracking partner. You should find someone like us or others to help you build that into your pipeline, because that is ultimately how you're going to say, my fine-tuned version of this foundation model is unique to me and my company and my IP. And that is the software technology play you'll be able to use 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And if you're smart and you have an audit and tracking partner helping you license data to other AI developers, you will have passive income from that. This is where residuals are going to come back.
Amen. So AI is moving fast, but producers, we move smart. We have always been the one, right? We handle the budget, the schedule, the talent, and the risk. And that means we hold the power to set the terms. This isn't about being anti-AI. It's being pro-creatives, pro-credit, pro-storytelling. So use license models, lock in your contracts, look at the fine print. It is your best friend. And if we navigate this together and we share our successes, and mostly we share where we stumble with each other so we don't all make the same stumbles, I think history will remember, in the end, the producer just didn't survive the AI shift. We all shaped it. So let's say thank you to Ghaith and Kathleen. Thank you for being here.